Hi again. In this case, we're going to be applying materials to our chair. So let's get started. Let's go to the material editor, and we can actually use just one texture to create a very complex material. In this case, our wood. So first of all, what I want to do is just to give the color to each part of this chair. For example, the legs, the supports, and what I mean by that is the vertical supports and the horizontal supports. I also want to separate the seat from the back of my chair. So all of them will have a different kind of material. So for this, I need to assign a different material ID to each of these pieces. So let's go ahead and do that. Once we're happy with how our chair looks, and in this case, I'm just thinking if it's necessary to add an extra iteration, which I really don't think it's going to be necessary. But if you see that your chair needs extra smoothness, just add an extra iteration there. But in my case, I'm gonna leave it as it is. Now I'm going to right click, convert to an edit poly. So I'm basically going to collapse all of my modifiers here, which it's just one at this moment. Now I'm going to go to the element selection. Now because we've worked in these pieces separately, each of them are separate. But for now I just want to give a different material ID to the seat and to the back. So I can do this by selecting the element and going all the way down here until I reach the polygon material IDs. I'm going to set this specific element to 2, and also I want the same ID for my back here. So I'm going to change this. Notice that this is at 1. I'm going to change it to 2. And I can even go a step further and say that the horizontal supports will also have a different kind of material. So I'm going to pick all of the horizontal ones and give them a 3 as an ID. And that should be all that we need to do. I'm going to isolate this chair. So Alt plus Q. And let's go back to our material editor. Now each one of these IDs that I've just placed are going to have a different tone of the wood texture that I have here. So for this, I need to create a submaterial. So if I just typed in sub, this is the multi-sub object. And because we're going to be working with only 3 IDs, so let's go ahead and set number and change it to 3 and OK. Let's just make this a bit bigger. And now what I want to do is just to copy this same material 3 times and apply it to each one of our sub IDs here. Let's just place this in the center point. Now with the help of my Corona color correct, I'll be given different tones to each of these materials. So I'm going to double click on my Corona color correct. And in this case, I know that my material ID number 2 is set for my seat and my back. So I'm just going to make them darker. So let's go ahead and change these to 1. And we can't really see any change because we need to actually apply the multi-sub object to this chair here. So I'm going to right click and assign material to selection. Okay, and now we see that we've made a mistake there. So we actually need to assign an ID to these vertical supports. Let's just assign it to number 1. Okay, that should fix the problem. Let's go back. And now for my horizontal railings there, I'm going to use a more lighter color, probably a number 2 for the gamma in our Corona color correct. And that's a bit too much. Let's go up to just 1.7. All right, now, so in order to make this a bit more complicated, if you will, just by adding some extra components here so that we can create a more complex material, we can just introduce a new component, which in this case, it's called composite. So make sure that you're actually picking the darker one. And here in the composite, it works similar to the mix component. And it's actually called the Corona mix. So this Corona mix, if you remember correctly, we can actually mix different textures. However, we cannot give it a mask. So masks, and you can see that in the composite component, we can have this mask option. So it works basically, if I go back to my Corona physical material, you can see that we have some squares here in which we can add some maps to mask certain textures. So what does this mean is that if we only want a texture to be acting in some parts of the surface and not in all of the chair in this case, we would add some masks. So let's say that I want to add some dirt or some type of scratches or an extra bump to certain parts of my chair. I would have to use the mask. So we can say that the composite, it's actually a bit more advanced than the Corona mix. Don't get me wrong, we'll be using Corona mix lots of times, but in the composite we have the opportunity to mask our textures that are being mixed. So if I go inside here, I can also tell it to subtract, multiply, or overlay, and so on. And we're going to be checking what most of them do. So for example, the multiply, we've already seen it. It's just to extract the darker parts of a certain texture. So let's get started. And in this case, what I can do is just to add an extra detail to my seat by adding some imperfections to it. For this, I'm just going to copy my Corona color correct. And I'm going to add a lighter tone to it. Let's say 2 in our gamma, and I want this texture to be seen in certain parts of my seat. So I'm going to bring in a dirt map for that. So let's go ahead and type in Corona bitmap and look for our dirt map. So here I have my dirt map and also a scratches mask. In this case, I'm going to go for my dirt texture and bring it in here. And now we're going to be using the composite component. Okay, if I go inside here, I'm going to be wanting this Corona color correct, which is the base material. We can take it as the base material into layer 1. And to add an extra layer to this, so notice that I cannot input any more textures here. So I need to go to this icon which says add a new layer. Now I can add a new layer to this material and it's going to be this one. So the lighter texture there. But in this case, I want the lighter texture to only appear in certain parts of my geometry. So I'm going to mask it with my dirt map. So let's just plug it into the mask here. Now let's go ahead and start an interactive render to see how this is looking. But before that, we need to add a background to this chair. So one thing to keep in mind when you're rendering products is that we don't want any shadows in our background. So let's go ahead and create a plane. And make sure that you don't have any segments on your plane, just one by one in length and width. Now I'm going to right click, convert to edit poly. I'm going to pick these two edges here and connect them just once because I want to create a background for my product. I'm going to drag this edge here, select my edge for my background and just bring this wall up. Let's move it closer, and all of these edges, let's also move them a little bit closer there. All right, now when I add a lighting to my background here, you can see that this sharp edge at the back is going to produce some kind of shadows, and I really don't want to produce any shadows. I want to have a smooth background just to avoid having any shadows at the back. So for this, I'm going to smoothen out this edge here. If I go to the chamfer and add an extra chamfer at the back here, and to smoothen this up, I'm going to have to add some extra segments, like so. Now when I add some kind of light into this, I'll have minimum shadows going on the back. And I can even smoothen this up a bit more, but I don't think it's going to be noticeable when I add some lights. Now let's go ahead and bring in a Corona light here. So let's go to the bulb tab, and in here let's change it to Corona, and I'm going to create a Corona light, no longer a Corona sun, because we're going to be adding artificial lighting to this product here, just as if we were doing a commercial about this chair. So let's go and create a Corona light, and we have all of these options down here. For the moment, because we're not doing a night scene, we're only going to show this product off. We're going to change the shape of our light from sphere, because if I create a sphere, we don't really need this. We need some kind of light that will produce a direct lighting to our chair here. So I'm going to change it from sphere to rectangle. And let's just add a rectangle, and it acts just like any other plane from 3ds Max. So I'm just going to bring it up a little bit and rotate it, and you can see where this light is going to be produced is going to be at the bottom here. So I need this light to be reflecting to my chair there. So I'm going to rotate it and face it to my object, like so. Let's just move it back a little bit, and let's copy this. And I actually wanted to copy it as an instance, so let's try that again. Instance it, and OK. Now let's rotate it like so. Alright, we need to also add a material to our background. So let's go to our material editor, and obviously we don't want any texture on it. We just want a white material. I'm going to go for my Corona physical material. Right click and assign material to selection. Okay, let's go ahead and start our interactive render now. Alright, so our lights are a bit too bright, so inside our Corona light and intensity we can lower this to, let's say, 10. Let's just not produce any lighting in our floor, so we can move this and get it closer to here, or actually just move it a little bit further up. Let's stop the interactive render and place these lights correctly. Now I need to change how my gizmo is working, and for that I'm going to go up here to view and change it from view to local, so that it actually acts in the position in which my rectangle light is working. Like so. And maybe we won't need this one. I just want the lighting to come in just one direction. And the reason that I'm going to do this is because I also want to see the shadows that my roughness will produce, or my bump, or so on. Let's start the interactive render now. Alright, this looks much better. Let's get closer to our chair. And one thing that we need to change in the performance tab is the fast preview denoise during render. Because I want to see my actual texture again, I don't really want to see any denoising. So I want to also see the noise that is going to be produced to check the material parameters correctly. So I'm going to disable the fast preview denoise rendering and get a little bit closer to my chair here and start a new interactive render. Okay, this looks way better. So let's start to create a new material. Okay, so first of all, we have the composite. And now that we've added some extra details to it, I'll be placing this in the base color. So remember that our material IDs for our seats is actually not this one, it's number 2. So we need to just replace this material with the one at the top. I'm going to bring it down here and this one up here. Okay, I'm just going to delete this wire. And let's place this in number 2 and this one up here in number 1. Oops, I just disconnected this one over here. And there we go. Okay, so let's start the interactive render again. Now, you can notice that I've added some extra detail to my seat by using just the composite component with some masking to it. I can actually make this a bit more pronounced by adding a 5, let's say, and we need to keep in mind that the masking for this is going to act with our lighter colors on our map. So let's open the preview window and I'm going to stop the interactive render. So what is happening is that it's taking the lighter colors from our mask to put this lighter texture on our material here. But I want to invert that. So I'm just going to select the bitmap and I'm going to go all the way down here to output, and we have this invert option. So let's just click invert, and now let's try our rendering again. You can see that our lighter color is only being applied on our darker tones within our bitmap. So we've just created this worn out material really quick by using just our Corona color corrects. And also we should see something similar to the one at the top. So in order to play around the mapping of our dirt map here, we can change the tiling of the map. So if we increase the tiling, it's going to make itself smaller. Let's try a 5 by 5 in its tiling, and it's only going to change the way that this map tiles, because remember that we already have everything mapped within our chair. So let's go into the interactive render, and you can see how this has changed. Now 5 by 5 is way too much. We can actually go for 0.5 by 0.5. Now we need to add a roughness to our chair just to make it a bit more realistic. And actually we can just leave it this at 1 by 1 for the moment. And now let's add a roughness. Let's stop the interactive render. We can produce a roughness just by getting some more Corona color correct in here. Corona color correct. All right. And now I want to use the roughness from this actual composite output. So let's bring this in like so, because basically this is going to be our final material. So I want to use the roughness of this final material. So the roughness reads only light and dark colors in a grayish tone. So we need to reduce all of its color from the Corona color correct, and we can do that by reducing the saturation. So -1 just to make it a black and white color, and I can make it a bit darker. For this I'm going to be placing 0.7 in our gamma just to make it a bit darker, and now we can place this in our base rough. So let's go inside our material, open preview window, and it's a bit too shiny, so we can go ahead and increase our roughness to 1, and I can actually increase the gamma just to get a bit more roughness in 1.3. Okay, so the lighter the color will be, the rougher our material. Let's just go ahead and type it in 2 and start our interactive render. All right, now let's go ahead and type in a 1.6. And inside our Corona physical material, we can bring this back to 0.75. All right, so we've added just a little bit more of roughness there, and we can actually use the original texture instead of our composite to see if we can change this a bit. All right, let's just leave this gamma at 1.5. And now what I want to add, it's an extra bump. So that should bring in a bit more of realism to our material. And we can actually use the same method. I'm just going to copy this Corona color correct and add it to our base bump here. Let's go ahead and start interactive render again. And let's add a 5 in our bump. Okay, so we're starting to see some extra details here, but I actually don't want to use the original texture for this. I'll be using my dirt map. So let's plug this in and let's reduce the bump to around 2. And now we've added some detail here to our borders, but it's a bit too much. We can leave it at 1 for the moment. It's still a bit too much. We can leave it at 0.5. Okay, so we're adding some more detail here, and I want to use an extra layer here in our composite just to add a bit more detail to our seat. So I'm going to bring in a scratches map. So let's go ahead and bring in a Corona bitmap again, Corona bitmap, and use our scratches now. So for this, I'm going to add a new layer to my composite. So inside our composite, let's go ahead and add new layer. Now I'm going to just drag this component into our layer 3 mask, and I'm going to copy this Corona color correct and add a different tone to this one. Let's just plug it in layer 3, double click on it, and this tone is going to be way darker, so a 1 should do it. However, we need to invert this map. Let's go ahead and go down here, output, and invert. Let's see how this is looking. Start interactive. And yes, it's looking fine. We should blend it in a bit more. So let's go ahead and type in 1.3, maybe a 1.5. And there we go. What I do want is the darker tones to be affecting our seed. So I'm just going to go to my actual corona color correct here and make it a darker tone. So a 1 should do it. Let's just reduce all of the gamma to our parameters here. Okay, yeah, this is looking better. And we actually need to go inside of our roughness map and give it a little bit more of gamma because it's been reflected too much. So number 3 should do it. All right, this is looking perfect. Now let's go and play with our other supports. So this time our legs. And let's just stop our interactive render. Let's bring in a composite. And let's copy our corona color correct. Now let's bring in some masks, corona bitmap for this. The dirt texture first, let's bring in a scratches over here too, and okay. Now again, I'm just going to add 2 more layers to my composite. And these tones are going to be increased from 1 to 1.5. And I'm going to go ahead and copy another one. And this tone will be something in between, something like 1.3. So let's go ahead and add this to my layer 1. This one will go to my layer 2. And finally, this one to my layer 3. Now, first of all, I want the scratches to be affecting layer 2. So let's go ahead and place them on the mask. Remember to invert the corona bitmap. So I'm going to go down here to output and invert this one, and also to my scratches. So down here to output, invert, and let's place it now for this masking. Okay, now we have some kind of complex material here. Okay, let's just place this one in here, and we also will be needing a roughness map. So for this, I'm going to bring in a corona color correct to desaturate our material and be able to produce a map for our base roughness. In this case, I'm also going to go for my original texture, and let's change the saturation to -1 and place it on our base roughness. Now we obviously need it to be a bit more rough. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and type in a 3 on our gamma. And let's open our preview window, and it's looking pretty good. So let's go and start our interactive render to see how this is going. All right, so it's not that noticeable. So in this case, what we need to do is just to add a bit more tiling to our masks. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a 3x3 on this case, and also a 3x3 on this one over here. Now let's lighten up some of our material here to bring these imperfections up a bit. So let's go for 2, and this one would have 1.7. Something of this sort will do. This is a bit too pronounced. Let's go for a 1.3 again, or again 1.5 should do it. All right, now our base texture, let's make it a bit lighter, 1.3, just to make it contrast with our seed. We can actually bring all of these up. So a 2 for gamma. In this case, I want to add a 3 for our imperfections linked to this mask here. And also we can go up to a 5 for this one, just to see it. It's too much, obviously. Let's go for a number 3, and this is looking pretty good. Okay, so finally, our horizontal supports. In this case, I want to make them really dark just to have it as a contrast. So let's go ahead and add a 0.7. That's too much. A 1, yeah, around 1 will do. Let's try something else. Okay, 1.2 looks great. So once more, let's bring in a composite component and our usual textures. We can actually just copy them So let's bring this one in with our shift key, and this one at the top also with our shift key. There we go. Now I'm going to be placing this base layer here and plugging it into my base color. I need to add 2 extra layers, as we already know, and also I'm going to copy this corona color correct. So in this case, I want the imperfections to be a bit darker. So let's go ahead and type in 1 for this one, and also probably a 0.8 for our scratches there. Let's place them correctly. So this one will go into layer 2 mask and my scratchers into our layer 3 mask. And now we only have to plug these textures in. Okay, let's get a little bit in here. We obviously need to add a bit extra tiling. We can have something like this for our dirt. And if we go inside of our scratches, we can also add some more scratches by increasing the tiling of our material. There we go. Now we can add a corona color correct in between our composite and our base color. And let's just increase the gamma to 1.3. Okay, now we should add some kind of roughness to this. And actually I'm just going to use the composite. So corona color correct, input it like so, and this will go into our roughness. Obviously I need to change the saturation to -1 and increase the gamma to around 2 will do it. Let's also increase the roughness to 1 so it doesn't go that shiny. And now I want to bring in only my scratches as my base bump. Place this bump over here and let's have a better look at it. Okay, so because we have it inverted, this is happening. What I'm going to do is just to copy this scratches, and I'm going to go all the way down here to output and invert them again. And this time I'll go to my base bump like so. All right, so this time my scratches are actually going inwards and not outwards. And let's go inside our corona physical material, and I can actually just reduce this to 0.7. Let's go ahead and 0.3 just to make it those scratches a bit smoother. Alright, so in our tiling, I'm going to have this at 1 by 1, and you can see how the scratches look there. This is looking terrible. Okay, so we can actually leave the values for U and V of our base bump in this case at 3 and 2, because it looks pretty good. Alright everyone, so thanks again for listening. This is it for this lecture. In the next one, we're going to be seeing how we can add an extra detail to the edges using one of Corona's components. Make sure to try your own maps, such as the scratches map and also dirt maps. Play around with the composite and also with the bump and roughness maps. Bye for now.